Somewhere in the middle of an endless railway, a locomotive rolls to a stop at a small station. Outside there's frost, wind, and not a single house for miles. We tend to think that after a shift, a driver simply walks off to a hotel. But that's not how it works. In reality, many train crews sleep right inside the locomotive, just centimeters from roaring machinery, constant vibration, and metal walls that bleed heat into the freezing air. Every single shift, thousands of railway workers face this strange way of life. On some stretches of track there are no hotels at all. On others, the trip to reach one takes longer than the rest itself. Sometimes a crew lies down for just a couple of hours, ready to fire up the locomotive again at any moment. One delay is enough to throw dozens of trains off schedule. In this video, we'll show you how train crews rest inside the locomotive and why the railway still uses a system like this today. Imagine you've been wrestling the wheel of a truck for 12 hours straight. Your arms are buzzing, your eyes are closing on their own. But instead of a warm bed, you're offered a narrow iron shelf and behind a thin wall. A diesel engine putting out 4,000 horsepower rumbles and shakes without ever stopping. This is an ordinary evening for a lot of drivers. A freight train travels far. Along the way it passes tiny stations that workers call turnaround points. Around these places there isn't a single house, shop, or cell tower for 100 kilometers. Just rails, forest, and snow up to your knees. The train stops because the crew has run out of working hours. By law, they can't go further. The driver and his assistant have to sleep. Nobody is going to build a dormitory at a station like this. Keeping one heated building running with cooks and cleaners would cost millions every month, and trains stop here only 2 or 3 times a week. It's simply cheaper to let people sleep inside the locomotive. Rest time gets cut to the minimum. Often the dispatcher gives the crew just 3 or 4 hours. If the drivers walked to the nearest village, they'd only burn through their time. They'd sign off duty, fill out paperwork, lock the cab, walk through the dark, pass a checkup with the medic, and the trip alone would eat up 2 hours. Only 60 minutes would be left to sleep. So they roll out their mattresses right there at the workplace. There's another reason not to leave. In winter, it's -30 outside. If you fully shut down a heavy diesel locomotive and walk away, it freezes in an hour. The cooling water turns to ice, the pipes burst, the batteries drain. Starting that machine again out in the wilderness would be impossible. A locomotive worth hundreds of millions turns into a useless heap of cold metal. So the crew stays on board to guard it. The drivers sleep while the iron beast keeps humming and waiting for the command to depart. Think about how many minutes you need at home just to open your eyes, crawl out of bed, and get to your desk. A driver on the road has only a couple of seconds. He opens his eyes and he's already at his workstation because his bed is bolted directly behind the control desk. The railway runs around the clock. There's no fixed lunch, no exact time to head home. All movement is controlled by one person, the dispatcher. He sits behind a screen hundreds of kilometers away and sees the whole map of the tracks. If one train breaks down or a passenger train runs late, the entire schedule collapses. So a crew sleeping inside can be woken over the loudspeaker at any minute. The order comes, wake up, start the engine, your path is clear, we leave in 5 minutes. The driver has to go the moment he's asked. There's no such thing as I didn't get enough sleep. The dispatcher opens the track, the train has to move. The price of 1 extra minute is a broken schedule, and the crew pays for it out of their own pocket. Tons of coal, tank cars full of gasoline, and thousands of passengers all get stuck behind these trains. That's why workers sleep in their clothes and boots so they can snap into action instantly. The rules say that after a long shift, workers get proper rest in a special rest house, but in practice, dispatchers often log the stop not as rest between shifts, but as ordinary technical waiting. On paper, the train is just waiting for a green signal. In reality, the two of them take turns climbing onto the shelf. The assistant sets an alarm and lies down on the narrow bunk. While one does, the other watches the instruments. 2 hours later, they switch. It's hard to call this real sleep, it's more like a continuous watch, where the brain keeps filtering every change in the hum of the machine. You might ask, do drivers really sleep in their chairs, heads on the hard panel? In the old Soviet trains, people resorted to the wildest tricks just to stretch their stiff legs. In locomotives like the VL-80, the designers built no sleeping spots at all. The chair was rigid, the backrest didn't recline, the armrests were hard plastic. Men brought wide wooden planks from home, laid 2 boards between the passenger seat and the driver's seat, covered them with an old jacket, and that's how you got a hard bench. Others carried inflatable beach mattresses, pumped them by hand, and laid them on the metal floor away from the controls. The most experienced hung fabric hammocks, tying the ropes to the heating pipes in the engine compartment. It was warmer there, but the roar was like sleeping inside a running washing machine full of bolts. In newer locomotives, factories started building proper sleeping spots. Behind the chairs, they now mount narrow fold-down bunks about the size of the upper berth in a sleeper car. They have a thin foam mattress and rubber straps so a person doesn't fly to the floor when the train brakes hard, but even then, you can't just fall asleep. That's why every driver's bag holds earplugs or construction headphones. Without them, drowning out the roar behind the wall is impossible. Life on a trip like this feels like camping deep in the woods. There's no plumbing, no sink, no sewage. Crews bring water for washing and tea in 5-liter bottles. They heat food on the move using hot plates or microwaves they buy with their own money. In the old days, with no hot plate, they'd heat a sealed can near the heat exchangers. 5 minutes later, the metal was so scorching, you had to pull the food out with thick gloves. Most freight trains still don't have a toilet at all. On the old machines, people step outside during stops on remote stretches no matter the icy wind, the rain, or the deep snowdrifts. Think about trying to sleep when your body is constantly shaking, and the metal around you goes from scorching to freezing in minutes. The iron cab is about the size of a cramped closet, made entirely of thick steel and fitted with huge windows. In summer, that glass works like a greenhouse. The sun heats the metal to 50 degrees, and the air becomes as hot as a sauna. Sweat pours off you. Drivers open the side windows, but then clouds of mosquitoes and dust pour in. In winter, the cab turns into an icebox. Even with the diesel running, a bitter draft blows through every crack, so you sleep in fur jackets and hats, pressing your back against the frozen iron partition. The main enemy of any sleep on the railway is the constant, maddening noise. Even when the train stands still, the locomotive is never silent. Enormous fans spin non-stop to cool the electric motors. Every 10 minutes, with a terrifying crash and hiss, the compressors kick in, pumping air into the braking system at a pressure that could blow apart a car tire. The sound is like a heavy wardrobe falling over. Add the whistle and thunder of freight trains flying past on the neighboring track at highway speed, the ground and the locomotive itself shudder. A life like this wrecks your health. From the constant fine vibration like sleeping on a jackhammer, workers start suffering chronic back and joint pain after just 5 years. From the endless roar of the motors, many drivers begin losing their hearing by 40 and talk too loudly at home. Getting proper rest here is impossible. A person wakes every half hour from the next bang or jolt, gets up with a heavy head, and sits right back down at the controls. Now for the main twist. What do the official rules actually say? If you open the thick books on labor safety, you'll find a strict ban. Locomotive crews are absolutely forbidden from sleeping in the cabs during rest between shifts. The law says it plainly: a driver must sleep only on clean sheets, in special rooms with no noise, soft-colored walls, and thick curtains over the windows. But in practice, these rules are broken constantly. The blame lies with the orders that come down from above. The whole railway lives for one number: trains must run on time. The dispatcher answers for his section of track with his own neck. If he stops a heavy coal train and sends the workers to a hotel on foot, he wrecks the schedule across the entire region. It's much easier to press a button and say, "Just wait here 3 hours, sleep in your chairs, I'll wake you." And this is where the so-called partisan rest begins. The drivers know they're breaking the rules. If a surprise inspection shows up, the whole crew loses their bonus and the depot boss gets a huge fine. So they get clever. They hang old rags or cardboard tightly over the windows so nobody outside can see the signals or the glowing instruments. One guards the radio while the other lies down. 2 hours later, they switch. Top management knows about all of this, but deliberately turns a blind eye. Inspectors only check the big junction stations you can reach by car. No boss travels out to the deep forest or the distant steppe sidings. Everyone understands that if you start punishing people for sleeping in the cabs, drivers will abandon their locomotives and go on sick leave. In that second, thousands of rail cars get stuck across the country, factories stop receiving raw materials, and stores stop receiving goods. The whole economy holds together on the fact that people quietly make compromises and sleep in iron boxes at their own risk. But are modern technologies really powerless here too? The situation is starting to change. Railway factories are already rolling out locomotives of a completely new type. The old gray drafty cabs are becoming a thing of the past. In their place come machines where the workspace looks more like a modern clean room. Engineers install thick plastic panels and double-glazed windows that keep out the cold. The walls are lined with soft mats that muffle the compressors and oncoming trains down to the level of a kitchen fridge. Full climate systems are mounted inside. Press a button, and the air conditioner holds a steady 72 degrees, hot or cold outside. Behind the chairs, they build separate rest modules with 2 proper beds, outlets for phones, reading lamps, and pull-out tables for food. At the same time, the railway is rolling out modular houses, small buildings assembled at factories, hauled to the deep forest by train and lowered by crane beside the tracks. Assembling one takes just a couple of days. Inside there's a warm toilet, a shower with hot water, a small canteen, and clean sleeping rooms. Now the crew doesn't have to sleep on a shelf in the cab, it's enough to walk 30 steps to a warm porch. The biggest change waiting for the railway is trains without drivers. Developers are already testing automatic control systems on freight lines. The computer sees the signals itself, smoothly accelerates a train weighing as much as 100 loaded planes, and brakes on time before the stations. An electronic robot doesn't get tired, its eyes don't glaze over after 12 hours, and it doesn't need to sleep on a narrow bunk to the thunder of a diesel. When automation fully replaces the human being, this harsh way of life will finally become part of history. The modern railway is a giant mechanism of hundreds of thousands of parts. Smart computers work here, satellites fly overhead, and new locomotives worth millions roll along the rails. But all of this still depends completely on ordinary people in work jackets and heavy boots. Drivers and their assistants climb into the cabs every day, take the controls, and do their hard job. They lie down to sleep on narrow shelves behind the panels, not for romance, but because they know the price of every minute of downtime. If one freight train gets stuck at a remote siding, movement stops for hundreds of kilometers. Factories won't get their coal on time, and people at the stations won't get their trains. Next time you're standing on a platform or at a road crossing and see a huge freight train a kilometer long rushing past with a clatter and a whistle, remember this story. Look at the small glowing windows of the cab. Behind that glass, right now, sit 2 tired men. Maybe one is staring ahead at the rails, while the other sets up his short, 3-hour rest on the iron floor. Human endurance, steady nerves, and the ability to adapt to any harsh conditions remain the main fuel for the railways of our entire vast country. No smart robots have yet replaced a simple driver. These people keep doing their duty in any weather, in blizzards and hard frost, proving that human will is stronger than iron. They fall asleep to the clatter of the wheels and the hum of the compressors, so that tomorrow morning the whole country gets its cargo on time once again.